Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Tech Athlete Show. My name is Williams, and this is where I share my story on how I went from just being a regular teenager to getting interested in tech. So, with the Tech Athlete Show, this is where I describe in details personal events that occurred and ultimately led to my resolve to becoming a world class software engineer. And in the last episode, I shared my story on how I got to know about Andela and how I then applied and finally made it to the boot camp after months of not being able to do so. So, in this episode, I'll be sharing with you all that I experienced during my boot camp at Andela and the result of what happened at the end of the whole experience. So, do sit back and let's begin today's story. So I'm surfing through the internet and generally just looking at stuff when I decided to casually go through my mails, and I found out to my greatest pleasure a mail from Andela. I can remember the rush of excitement I felt because finally, after about 3 to 4 months of trying and coming short, I had finally gotten a shot at the boot camp. And after reading through the mail in excitement, of course, and then securing my spot, because like you needed to secure a spot because like there were always a lot of applicants, and not to exaggerate, for every cycle, like about an average of 40,000 plus people apply for a spot in a fellowship cycle, and out of the whole 40,000, about 60 do get to the boot camp, while I think about 15 people in total just make it into the fellowship. And the reason I also know this is because there was this thing trending then about how difficult it is to get into the fellowship, and I think at the time a number of people compared its admission difficulty to Harvard. Although I suppose the reason it's that difficult is because of the amount of potential talents applying in every cycle. And honestly, you'd be surprised at how much talent we've got here in Nigeria, which is like totally mind blowing. A lot of people are good at a lot of stuff, and that I believe is one of the reasons that made it really difficult, because you were always together and in competition with the best of the best. It really was a whole new level. So after securing my spot in the boot camp, I got another mail with specific instructions on how to prepare for the boot camp. Mainly, the mail was all about what tools will be used in the boot camp, and after a few other things, and all of this happened over the weekend. So my boot camp was to begin on Monday at the beginning of the new week, and I was really pumped up about it, and I definitely was anticipating the whole experience because I was simply just like 2 weeks away from what has been my biggest goal for the past 3 4 months. And as soon as Monday arrived, trust me, I managed to get as much sleep as I could because I really couldn't sleep. I simply just couldn't wait for Monday, and as soon as I was up, I didn't take another hour around the house. Like I simply just hit the road in high spirit and was ready to like give it my best shot. But something did bother me over the weekend, and what really bothered me was during the past 5 months, the home study was mainly done using the Python programming language. So I had dedicated my time to learning how to write code in Python. But in the mail I got for this bootcamp, it specified that the programming language to be used is JavaScript. And when I like got through to a couple of people I knew at the time, they told me and encouraged me not to like be scared on what actual language will be used, and they told me to just like go ahead and like give it my shot because programming languages, they have a general logic to them, but the only difference you would find in it is in the syntax, which is mainly how the language is actually written. Okay, look at it this way: a programming language is a language the computer machine understands, and that is how a developer interacts with the machine and uses this language to give the machine specific instructions. Now you might be wondering, what then is the use of a programming language in giving instructions to a machine when, of course, like it's 2019, where we have more sophisticated tools that practically just understand your normal human language and can take specific instructions from you, and you could be wondering that why don't you just like dictate to the machine what you want it to do, and it just like gives you what you want it to do. Well, before a machine can understand your human language, it has its own default language by which it is then able to understand and interpret your own language, which is like your own like regular human language. So let's take Siri or the Google Assistant or even Amazon's Alexa for example. Mainly these tools are mainly softwares that take your spoken instructions and then bring you results. But before these tools can really understand every word you speak, the machine is taught to understand your language, and the way it learns all it needs to learn and then to function properly, all of that is done with the help of a programming language which is used to actually develop the software. And the programming language is also like a language in quotes that the developer also understand, or in most cases has a good understanding of what it is. But the way it is with software development, you can't have like a you can't say you have a 100% absolute understanding on it, because languages always evolve and things get better. So which is why there is no strict curriculum. Yes, definitely there's like a line or a path you would follow in case you want to like be good at a particular language, but then with time most languages evolve, which is one of the really fun facts about being a developer, because it will definitely make you constantly keep learning new concepts. And in case if you are scared of that, that really shouldn't scare you, because that's one of the things that makes a wonderful experience. Now there are definitely a lot of programming languages, and they are classified into like high levels and low level languages, but instead of going into all of that, I would simply just like leave a link that properly describes and explains what programming languages mean and what they are. And with all that being said, let's go back to where I stopped in my story. So I arrived at the Epic Tower. It's called Epic because those are the initials of the core values at Andela, which is mainly excellence, passion, integrity, and collaboration, which I believe are the core values we all as humans or as individuals should embrace, not just in our work lives but also in our personal lives as well. Anyways, as I got into the elevator with a number of fellows, and I had like a quick chat with the persons in there, telling them how excited I was to be at the boot camp and all. And yeah, of course, they were warm and they just generally advised me to seize the opportunity, which made me a little tensed because when we kind of like had this brief conversation in the elevator, and when they like generally congratulated me and then gave me a couple of advice, that was at the point at which I then like felt I was in some sort of Kodas Olympic, which definitely I was already in one even without actually realizing it yet. So after we all kind of like exited, when I exited the elevator and I then found my way and I then walked into the room where we were to use for our boot camp, which it was quite spacious, and already there were a number of people seated down already. So like before I got there, a couple others have been there before me, and everyone was just like having a fine chat with each other. I remember prior to my boot camp, I made friends with Ifosa, who helped me in completing a very challenging algorithm during the home study. And so it was quite amazing to have him at the boot camp as well. So like seeing him at the boot camp made me relaxed. And it was also exciting since I was just seeing him for the very first time, and the energy was really great in the room. After a couple of minutes, I think Victoria walks up to the board. Victoria is one of our like bootcamp guides, along with a couple of others, and she introduces herself and warmly welcomed us to the bootcamp. Then she made note about we all being paired into groups, which I wasn't aware of yet, but that didn't take long to rectify. So I found myself in a group of, I think we were about eight in number, and we had only one lady in our group. Actually, I don't think the total number of women in the boot camp were up to 10, which is why I am calling out to all women who are interested in tech to be more involved in tech, because aside from the opportunities available to everyone, I believe it helps provide balance to every team, and this balance, of course, helps us so much more. Anyways, as we proceeded into the first day of our boot camp and interacted with each other, firstly, every team got to know their boot camp team lead. Mainly, there was a name they had, but it's been a while. I hope I can like recall it later. Anyways, this team lead is an individual who is already a fellow. That is someone who is already in the fellowship, and they mainly were to gauge our performance in certain areas. And my bootcamp, oh yeah, it's called it's called bootcamp facilitator. So my bootcamp facilitator was Laddie. Laddie, Laddie is an awesome individual. Like he made us feel like so relaxed, and he was always ready to help us when we encountered issues. Mainly he was like our mini guide and proctor at the same time. But as the day progressed and we covered a number of things from belief system to version control to TDD, which is test driven development, I'll leave a link that explains what test driven development is in detail so you can better understand what all of what I just said means. So soon enough, we were at the peak of the day's event, which was writing actual code, and this was where things started to get really challenging. First off, we started with a few basic algorithm problems to, of course, be written in JavaScript. And generally, I wasn't that good at algorithm logic. So even if I knew how to properly write JavaScript, I still wouldn't know how I could properly write my algorithms. But anyways, I was able to get through a couple of tasks with the help of individuals in my group and Ifosa who wasn't that far away. And particularly that was how most of the day was for me. Then to wrap up the day's exercise, we were given a number of algorithm challenges and then asked to document our day's experience. Actually, we were just like asked to write an article on Medium describing how our experience for the day was. Lucky me, I was quite familiar with writing already because that was one of the things I picked up from Stevens. I talked about who Steven is in the first episode. He was mainly the friend who introduced me to coding in the first place. Although I had written a few articles on Medium, they were mainly just personal development and personal growth topics. So writing wasn't entirely new to me, but the algorithm challenges really bothered me. And one of the reasons was I had to learn a whole lot of new stuff in a very short amount of time. The reason behind this is because the learning process is incredibly fast paced. It got to a point I literally just wanted to walk out of the room because I felt I couldn't like take in another bit of new information, which sadly wasn't true. Although the test would have been easier if we had to just write the algorithms. But like I said, one of the things we covered during the day was test driven development. So the introduction of test cases, this was just like a whole new thing to me. Because typically in TDD, you practically had to write the conditions for your code, the conditions your code must pass before it's then considered a proper functioning solution. And the difficult thing about this is you can write a program that does all you require it to do, but also your code could also do a number of things you don't intend it to do. So TDD is mainly just there to help you like create balance so that your code actually does what it's mainly intended to do and does not like throw some errors or like catch some errors that you don't intend it to do or that could like break the program and stuff like that. My main point is if I simply just had to write the algorithms, that certainly won't be too hard. But the issue of then writing my own test cases, which is writing test cases is more of a it's more of a mental process than like writing actual code because like you have to personally think on certain variables and what to check for and what not to do. So since I had to write my own test cases, that was just off the roof for me. But since I was also here at the boot camp, which is something I have wanted for a while, I wasn't going to let this challenge like actually stop me. So I set out to work. Mainly setting out to work. Mainly what I mean is I was just googling stuff and referencing a couple of notes I had taken down during the day. So our deadline for the day was I think about 8 p.m. that Monday, but our bootcamp facilitator allowed us a deadline of 10 p.m. I think around either 9 or 10 p.m. because some of us wanted to return home and traffic could really be an issue. So just to make sure everything was balanced and everyone like had like a fair amount of time, I think he gave us till 10. But since I figured the distance from where I lived to the Epic Towers was a really daring one, and I may not make it home in 2 hours, so even if I left by 6, I might not be home by 8 or even 9. So by the time I would like then sit down with my algorithms and rest, then I could certainly be out of time. So I just resolved I was going to wait behind with a few guys and finish up before I did head home. But the irony was that I didn't finish all my tasks not until a couple of minutes past 11 p.m. And by the time I was done and had submitted my day's work, which in my honest opinion was a hot but a hot but very decent mess. I found out that there was only one person left with me in the whole room. So when most people were leaving is because the maintenance team had turned off the electricity in the whole building except for the first floor. So everywhere was practically dark except for, of course, the PC screens that were scattered scantily across the room. But since I was focused on just my screen, I didn't really know when the screens started to deplete and people like left and went home. So by the time I was done and on checking the time, it was I think a few minutes to midnight. I can't really say what time was, but I think it was like around 11:20 to 11:25 when I raised my head in a fit of triumph, only to find out that there was still one person left, and apparently he was still struggling with his test cases and did not even have the slightest idea what to even write about his own experience for the day, and mainly because he was overwhelmed and exhausted. Now the reason I know he was is because I was also feeling the same way at that time. I was feeling so exhausted and overwhelmed with the whole experience that day. But since he was the only one left, he asked me to help, which of course I cautiously told him I didn't have the slightest clue to how I solved my quizzes, but I could give him my solution. He's down for that. And he then mentioned he didn't even know how to properly like put his thoughts together about the day. So I offered to help him write his article. And by the time I had completed the whole quiz and then like just wrote a very quick article, we then like decide call it a day and head home. And by this time we're just a few minutes shy of midnight. And since it was late, he offered I should stay at his place, which he said wasn't really far from the Epic Towers, but I politely declined and said I was just going to head home. So after we walked down a good number of stairs because we couldn't take the elevator, and then we went out through the gates and we said our goodbyes. I was walking down to the bus stop to catch a bus, and that was when I then noticed that there were actually no buses. Although like there were a few buses, most of them were not even going in my direction, so I could say like there were no buses. And the next major bus stop was actually a very good distance from where I was, and it had this notoriety for, well, let's just say a lot of uncool things happened a lot around there, majorly around that time of the night. So considering all these variables, I decided I was going to spend my night at the Epic Towers. But the problem was I wasn't really sure if the security would allow me back in. But since I definitely wasn't going to walk all alone in the space of midnight and trying to like get a bus going home, I just like had to like try my luck. Although I had silently resolved that if I wasn't allowed into the building, I'd spend the night with the security guys, perhaps offering to stay watch and if they would like maybe allow me a cup of hot tea and like a few minutes of short eye just to get some rest. But also, like, I was also thinking to myself, if I definitely did have a cup of tea and like a few minutes to sleep, definitely I would sleep all through the night and not have to like stay watch. But anyways, as I walked back to the Epic Towers and I contemplated what ploy I could actually play. Now, I think this was mainly Hollywood coming into play in my head. So I remembered when I got to the Epic Towers that morning, virtually everyone who walked there like had a tag with a blue handle around their necks. And lucky me, I still had my ID from when I worked in construction. Well, before tech and gaming, yeah, I had worked in construction, and that was where I like met this white engineer who told me something along the lines of the future is in the, then he made this gesture with his hands of him typing over a keyboard, but I simply couldn't grasp exactly what he meant by that then, so that was it. So as I walked to the gate, I said hello to the guards and hanging my fake card across my neck, I said I then said I just came out of there, which was the Epic Towers, a few minutes, and would like to head back in. But although I was sure not to mention I was an employee, so I wouldn't draw attention to my card. Then the guard like stared at me for a few seconds, and then some other guard who was sitting said he can let me in. And of course, with a flash of confidence, I walked like I actually did walk in there. But to be completely honest, I don't think that actually worked because I came up with some silly ideas. But I think mainly because they were just being humane and recognized I was the person who just walked out of the building a couple of minutes ago. And so they just allowed me to go in. So as I walked into the building, of course I had no choice than to walk through the same flight of stairs, which was completely dark. And even as I was walking, truthfully, I was even scared. Anyways, I managed to find my way back to the boot camp room in all that darkness, and then I picked a spot in the corner. But it's funny how your mind like plays silly with you, especially when you're alone and quite scared of the dark. Naturally, I wasn't scared of dark, but I just couldn't shake away the thought of Chucky or some horror Hollywood movies I've seen. So what I did was I gathered together all the furniture in the room and I assembled them in a way I thought would protect me and give me like a head start in case some scary event was about to go down. And I don't know why I was all that paranoid, but after I had done that, I still found it hard to sleep. And this time, it wasn't because of the darkness, but mainly because I was still overwhelmed from the whole experience of the day, and I knew I wasn't completely like sized up for this whole challenge. But either ways, I was still going to like give it the best I got. But since I was out of power on my PC and the lights were out, I really couldn't do much at the moment. Only for a few moments later, like an hour later, someone turned on the lights and then I plugged in my PC, and of course I had the password to the bootcamp's hotspot. Well, we all did, so I just decided to like sit through the night and to learn as much as I could. And what I didn't like also notice is it's quite easy to lose track of time when you're in that state of mind, because in what I thought was about 2 hours was actually about 5 hours. So around 6 a.m. to 6:30, I decided like it was best I exited the building before anyone came around. Mainly, I just wanted to avoid trouble, so I thought. But I still felt like I haven't learned enough, so I didn't leave until around 7:30. That was when I then headed straight home. And as soon as I got home, I just like had a quick shower and grabbed a fruit or something, and I headed out straight to Gabriel's place. And we sat together trying to solve the tasks I had. So mainly, after the first day of the boot camp, we had to work from home on a couple of tasks. Although there was the option of coming to the Epic Towers in case electricity or data access, that's internet access, could pose a strong challenge to your efficiency. But for me, the transport cost to the Epic Towers was quite expensive for me at the time. So my best option was to work with my friend. So the both of us worked on my bootcamp project for the next 3 days, and as enlightening as the experience was, my mental strength was definitely put to the test more than anything I have ever done up to that point. What I paid least attention to was my health. So in a bid to always like complete my algorithms and beat deadline, which I never actually did, I still like did not even get enough sleep. Actually, I didn't get any sleep for, I think, from Monday till Wednesday, and that could sound like I'm exaggerating, but true. I didn't really like get enough sleep. I don't even think I slept at all, but maybe if I did, I don't even think like it lasted a couple of hours, and this affected me more than I even can imagine, because the truth was my mental strength was declining heavily, and I was just a plane on autopilot, which was why by Thursday I couldn't even make sense of anything I had been doing over the past 3 days. So my friend Gabriel had to show up at my place and help me with my last project, which was a very huge relief. On the Friday of my first bootcamp week, we all had to return to the Epic Tower where we needed to wrap up the exercise for the week. And this was where our performance for the week would determine if we made it into the next week or not. So like that was how it worked. But on Friday, I was practically very tired because I haven't like taken care of myself during the week. But when I got to the Epic Towers that Friday, I was really surprised to discover that a couple of people had actually bailed out of the whole program, mainly for, of course, for personal reasons. But one thing I could think of was perhaps because the way it was really intense. Like the first boot camp week was really intense. So like I even remember me bursting into like a controlled laughter. Like seriously, was it really that tough? Like truthfully, it was that tough. But I thought I was the only novice in the room, but it turns out I wasn't. Then for the fact that I decided to show up on Friday, even when I knew that for a fact my work for the whole week was not exactly up to par, by the time I then even like had the courage to show up on Friday, even I myself was starting to like my own confidence. So right before we started the day, I spoke with a few guys on my team, and what I then discovered, okay, it wasn't exactly a discovery at this point, but what I noticed was everyone had practically worked on their projects all by themselves, which, if you look at it, could seem like it was like the right and sensible thing to do. But I'll get into that later in this episode. So as the day started and we all caught up from the week's experience, and then of course we go into another round of learning new things. And at this point, my zombie mode kind of kicked in because mainly I was really tired and I could hardly make sense of anything that was actually going on. But I didn't want to sleep, but I was really struggling hard not to fall asleep because that would mean I would miss out on some of the action going on. And of course, I didn't want that to happen. So I kind of was half asleep and half awake. And that was how it was for like a while. And then a number of things happened, of course, that kind of like brought in a new learning experience for me personally. And soon enough, as time rolled on, we were already at the main business of the day. So, for the main business of the day, every group was split into two subgroups, subgroup A and subgroup B. So, if you remember, like during the beginning of the episode, I did speak about everyone being split into groups. So, every group was now split into two sections. And then we were then given two projects to work on. I don't exactly remember if I was in group A or group B, but I know a group had to. So let's say all the group A's had to work on a salary calculation app, and all group B's had to work on a room checking app. So my own group, mainly let's just say group B, my group was to work on the room checking app, and practically what the app was to do was to show a list of rooms available, then show which ones were available at a given point in time, and then how many people were in a particular room. Now, all of that kind of sounds simple for me to process right now, but then in the moment, of course, I wasn't sure exactly what I was thinking. Anyways, when we then like had to select a team captain, who certainly wasn't me, of course not. We then set on to the task, but before we began, I made note of my lack of coding skills to our team lead, So, but I told him I could help with visuals and photo templates and like some other really simple stuff that even a non-tech person could do. But of course, the reason I brought this up was because I wanted to like be a team member, so I didn't just want to sit idle on the team. I just wanted to do something, if not anything. And I also remember I offered to kind of like manage the workflow, and he said like that was okay. So I went ahead and I drew up a Trello board and started assigning tasks, which at this point even sounds it sounds strange because I hardly could write. Yeah, I could write code, but nah, back then I said I just couldn't really write code. And this was me then assigning tasks to, okay, you have to work on this. Mainly it wasn't even that hard because I just asked questions. Okay, what exactly are you good at? And I was asking the questions like as if I actually even knew what exactly was going on, but I was just being a team member. So I drew up this Trello board and I assigned tasks, and then I created user stories, which was something we learned from agile development method. A user story is mainly it's more like a step-by-step guide on what a user would do or be able to do with a particular software, and that was just mainly what I did. While the others focused on actual code and the front end, the back end, there was even this guy, like he his front end skills was, I'd say even in my group he made the best, because one of the tasks we had to work on during the week was to make a replica of a particular site. Like I don't know how he did it, but of course, like he nailed it. Like he nailed it so well. And by the time we were doing the front end for this room checking app, mainly it was like a web app. Like he did it in less than 30 minutes, and based on what I saw, like the design concept was simple, but it was good. Maybe I'd say it was simple because I was the one who brought the pictures. So like the way he kind of made it look, the transitions and all that, like it was really fun. So while we kept working on the project and everyone was busy doing whatever it is they did, while when I wasn't actually really busy, I was just like watching YouTube to just like learn random stuff. So after about an hour or two, every team then had to assemble and give a presentation on their project as well as their personal input on the project itself, which of course everyone did. And when it got to my team's turn, and of course I was called up to like give my input on the project, I just simply said what I did, which was sort out for visual images, create the user story, and then assign tasks and keep the Trello board updated, which all sounded simple, but unlike every other person, like they didn't really seem to scrutinize me. They just like nodded, okay. So after the whole presentation, okay, it was quite obvious that during the presentation, most teams haven't completed their group project. I think it was just only one team that had completed the group project. Like they were the ones that worked on the salary checking app, and yeah, they completed the whole thing. Although their design was still lacking, but the app was working perfectly. So they were the only thing they just needed to do was work on their front end. But for the rest of us, most of us were still a very long way from completing the project. So we were given about 3 more hours to work. But most of us, including myself, didn't really do much concerning anything anymore. Most people just, once we were asked to continue working on the project, some people just picked up their bags and left, while I stayed back so that I could just savor the whole experience. When I stayed back, I decided to go around asking questions. And let me quickly go back to the note I made earlier on everyone working on their own project. So it actually sounds cool because we could say, yeah, if you work on your project all by yourself, yeah, you definitely test your skill capacity. But the truth is, you alone cannot be as effective as a group of people working together. And it was even Victoria who made a note on this particularly. It was then at this point I discovered that those who really did complete their task for the week were mostly those who actually worked together. So, but the rest of us is either we were too scared to ask for help or made assumptions that others might not like really help us, or simply just felt it was cheating of some sort. Now I was able to like gather this much info because when I stayed back, yeah, I went around like just asking, "Hey, my name is Williams. It's pleasure to meet you. How was the experience?" Mainly as if I was gathering like a documentary kind of thing, but I was just asking questions just to see how other individuals felt about the whole experience. And yeah, this was, and I got some of this response from a couple of them. Although personally for me, I would say I didn't ask for help because I thought my team members wouldn't like be so forthcoming to like really come to my aid. And the truth is that was even how most of us actually felt, even in my own group. So like we needed help, but we didn't ask each other because we just had this silly notion in our head that the other guy, yeah, the other guy definitely would be busy working on his project, but definitely if we then decide to work together, of course we would achieve more. But since we were all reluctant to ask for help, that didn't do anyone any good. So in at the end of the day, I went home, of course, knowing I had like a very amazing experience in the boot camp. Although I then had to wait till Sunday before I got a mail that was going to invite me to the boot camp the next week or not. And by Sunday, of course, I got another mail. And if you can guess really well, of course, it was a rejection mail. But this time I wasn't downcast at all. Because personally, I considered it a very fair assessment. The truth is, I wasn't really sure if I'd even fare well enough in the second week, since the way I did in the first week was a complete struggle. So going into the second week with like hell on high waters. Even personally, if I had gotten the mail to come to the second week, of course I would have showed up. But my confidence level would be really low going into the second week. Anyways, by the time I got my fourth rejection, I then resolved to like take 2 months off to learn all the important things I didn't properly understand during the boot camp. But I ended up reapplying late July, and even my application was because of the encouragement I got from my bootcamp facilitator, Laddie, who I still contacted frequently at the time. But right after I applied for the fifth time, then something happened, and that became a very huge turning point to my whole journey. And this is the story I'll be sharing with you all in the very next episode. I hope you enjoyed today's story, and I'm very excited that you've been a part of the Tech Athlete Show. I hope you found value in all of my personal experience so far, and if so, I'd like you to share this episode as well as other previous episodes to anyone in your space of influence that will also learn something valuable from these experiences I've shared. So until the very next episode, where I get to tell you about the drama that then occurred after I applied for the fifth time, then like take you in a groove of other things that then transpired up to the present. Till then, stay safe everyone and contribute something positive. My name is Williams Falodun, and this is the Tech Athlete Show. See you soon.